building a better Bay Area for a safe and secure future. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. Welcome to our daily program called Getting Answers. The goal of the show is to ask experts and get answers to issues like COVID-19, but today we are focusing on one topic only, Juneteenth, the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the end of slavery in America. Joining me this afternoon, he was the first African-American to be Speaker of the California Assembly and the first African-American mayor of San Francisco. Please welcome the one, the only Willie Brown Jr., the mayor. Hey, Mayor Brown.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And how are you?
I've been well. It's been a while, so really great to see you. And of course, today is Juneteenth. I want to ask you, how are you marking it?
Well, I'm having a great time. As a matter of fact, corporate America consulted me about 2 or 3 weeks ago, several, to say, what would you do and who would you get to tell us about Juneteenth? I said, well, I would be happy to do that because I have lived Juneteenth. I'm originally from Texas, and of course, that was the place where Juneteenth actually started. It was, in 1865, when the word came down that there had been the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation 2.5 years earlier. But as it is with Texans, we never got the word. We celebrated that, my ancestors celebrated that, and Texas had become the center of the source of that celebration. And I have loved every second of it. All of the rodeos, the parades, the baseball games, the barbecues, the well-dressed, and all the things that go with doing what you call a real Independence Day celebration. That's what Juneteenth really is, and I love selling it.
And a lot more people are starting to become aware and celebrating along with the Black community. I think that's the thing that as we watch this year's scope, it's so different in that we're talking about companies giving employees the day off. We're talking about people of all colors marching together. We're talking about discussions on a real level of making it a national holiday. Does that surprise you, just how far and wide it's gone?
Well, I got to tell you that it's been a long journey. It took till 1980 before Texas made it a state holiday, a full holiday, like America should make it, obviously, as you said, a national holiday. Well, we have a second state that's done that. The state of North Carolina has now made it last week a state holiday for North Carolina. There are 45 or 46 other states that have some form of commemoration, but not National Day, not a state holiday. It looks like the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives are going to do that. And that only comes, in my opinion, because of the intense nature of what occurred as a result of that brutality resulting in death by that police officer in Minneapolis. When that occurred, everything turned differently and changed differently. And I hope it lasts long enough to get us a national holiday out of the Juneteenth process that I have engaged in for years.
Well, we'll see when it becomes official. But when did you realize that George Floyd was going to be different, right? The reaction, the impact compared to the many, many unjust deaths that came before?
Well, when I witnessed, as did many people, and now many more, the actual killing of another human being, I've never had that experience. I've never watched another human being dying, and nor had anybody else. So the cell phone that created that experience for so many people, you could argue about police brutality. You could argue about viciousness and illegal conduct, and all those would be heard and in many cases sympathetically received. But we all lived the "I can't breathe" expression by George Floyd. And that has made a dramatic difference, not just in America. That's made a dramatic difference all over the world. When I listened to what was occurring in Switzerland, in Belgium, when I listened to what happened in France, when I listened to what happened in London, it's unbelievable the intensity of the desire to rid ourselves of any slave experience and anything connected with slavery from all over the world. And that means that it's different from the Trayvon Martin killing. It's different from the Michael Brown killing. It's different from the Oscar Grant killing. It's different from all the killings that you can name one day after another. It's frankly how the world should have reacted to the first lynching after the war. If it had been that way, we would now not be talking about police brutality and all the things that go with it. Kaepernick never would have had to take a knee. There would not have been several years of his absence from his chosen career profession, where he was literally barred from doing that. So this is different. I just hope it will last long enough for significant changes to actually be experienced, and changes that will institutionalize the desire to change.
Well, speaking of change, in the wake of Floyd's death, there are calls that are getting stronger to defund police, to disband police. I'm wondering, for those who say it's just too broken as a system or too racist to ever be fixed, and it's got to go, do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree. I think that literally shifting the focus into so-called defunding police is a mistake. That's a brand process that we should engage in. I've been in government long enough, probably longer than most of the people you'll ever see or personally know. I know what you can do with budgets, and I know exactly how budgets are done. So anything you want to do to modify the conduct of the public servant receiving the benefits of that budget, you can do without incurring the wrath of anybody or anything, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's the courts, whether it's the recreational system, whether it's the transit system. It doesn't matter. You can do what you need to do. You don't have to say defund. I also, by the way, believe that there needs to be guardians of public safety. Clearly, when I pick up the telephone and I call 911, I will tell you that I am not interested in a social worker answering my calls. I'm calling because I'm desperately fearful for my own safety, and I want somebody to come. Now, it may be that we eliminate people being armed who show up, but they've got to be trained to protect my survival, period, physically and otherwise. So I'm very careful to say you cannot engage in the kind of conduct that will be more reflective of your immediate political execution without understanding what all of this means long range. One example, nurses, lawyers, doctors, teachers, journalists, everybody is essentially trained to do whatever their profession says they should do. We ought to be training people who want to be guardians the same way, so that there be no question. Your journalism career has been measured by ABC, and it would be equally as applicable here as it would be in New York. And that's because your training has been similar, your conduct has been similar, the data bank shows your record, etc. That ought to be the same way with the people who are providing the guardianship for our safety, period.
All right. Mayor Brown, don't go away. We're going to take a short break on the air, but we'll continue this conversation over on our live streams, including Facebook Live right now.
We are in commercial break.
All right. We're still with Mayor Brown. I'm looking at commercial, which is disturbing, but the mayor's with us, yes? Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to hear it. But what do you think about removing officers from school campuses? Oakland's doing that now. Do you think in general that's a good idea to build a different relationship between police and youth?
There never should have been police on campus. That's ridiculous. I went to Mineola Colored High School. There was no such thing as a policeman on our campus. There were counselors, there were other persons who assisted one way or another, and the principal was the arbiter of the safety of all of us. And if there needs to be something done, people were called in to assist the safety bit. But a policeman on campus it's designed to have a different perspective of the role of a police in the minds of students, and that's wrong.
So while I understand completely what you're saying about, hey, when I call 911, I want someone trained, right? A police officer to be there for me, not a social worker. But do you agree with Mayor Lyndon Breed's move to suggest for some of the funding to be diverted and go towards social service agencies helping the Black community? Even, Chief Bill Scott says he's open to that. Does a reduction in funds make sense in your eyes?
I believe that all decisions about budgets ought to be in what's in the best interest of all of us, period, in all programs, etc. And I don't think one program ought to be identified as a sole source of redirecting funds. When I did the budgets for the state of California, and I was chair of the Ways and Means Committee, the first and only African American to ever chair the Ways and Means Committee in the entire state of California for the whole time it's been there. And everyone would tell you they were the most direct budgets because I understood every nickel of the expenditure.
We're coming back on air. Hang on. All right, we are back on air with the former mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. Mayor Brown, I want to continue the conversation. Early on, you mentioned that you were born in Texas, only 70 years after slavery had ended, and you said it was in a town just a few miles away from Galveston, a few hours, I should say, where Juneteenth originated. So what do you remember about growing up Black and the limitations you faced there?
Well, I will tell you that I remember my mother making sure that I understood quickly that if I was to survive in that racist world, that I would be always conscious of a negative potential reaction from everybody white, and that I had to make sure that I did not do anything to aggravate that condition. And believe me, every African American, every Black in my neighborhood, every Black in my community, in my church, in my school, was essentially educated the same way. I also grew up where the quality of education was minimal as compared to white students. The books we had were what white students used in previous years. I didn't realize how, ill-equipped some of those white students were until I saw the underlinings in the books that they used the previous years and how obviously they were misguided, period. I fully appreciated the fact that the nature of the separate but equal facilities totally and completely unequal. And I graduated before Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. And so I knew of the difference in the quality of school. When I got to California, I wanted to go to Stanford. I couldn't get into Stanford for reasons, by the way. One is I couldn't afford it. But secondly, I didn't have the previous classes that would allow me to enter Stanford and do the work that would have allowed me to have graduated from Stanford. Fortunately, I didn't get in, went to San Francisco State, and the rest is, of course, history. But it was all because there was a dramatic difference in what Black kids were exposed to education and what white kids were exposed to. This nation has been plagued with the remnants of racism since 1619, and it's plagued.
So when you came out here to California, how different was it in terms of the opportunities you had and the racism you faced?
Well, San Francisco supposedly was different, and it was, but not so different that I didn't have to participate in the effort for fair housing. One of the things that first caused the public to know Willie Brown was the demonstration that we did at 301 Christopher Drive, just to be able to look at a house. I believe that it was the first demonstration on the housing in San Francisco. I participated in getting the first Black person on the fire department in San Francisco. I participated in getting the first Black police officer. I participated in helping people on the Black side get the first opportunity to be toll takers on the bridge. At every level, I have participated. And believe me, I knew right out of the box that San Francisco, in terms of its attitude about unfairness to people of color, were just as bad as it was in the South.
Of course, you overcame that. You became Speaker of the Assembly and you became mayor. And of course, later on, you celebrated President Obama becoming president. In each of those circumstances, did you think we had overcome racism as a nation?
Not even close, believe me. When you think in terms of the war that was fought, and the 2.5 years later, we in Texas got word that it was over and had been over all that time, that Lincoln had done the Emancipation Proclamation, and then there was put in place a whole series of things that were evidence of Jim Crow, evidence of segregation. They were institutionalized. The attitudes were there. It had become almost like it was in the DNA of Americans. And much of that DNA still evidences itself every day of the week. And what happens, I'd get on a bus in the city when I first got here, and having been riding the bus in Dallas, where you move the sign, on one side it said white, and on the other side it said colored. You keep moving back to finally the coloreds all had to stand up, and the whites could be seated. When I got here, I'd be sitting and no one would sit next to me who wasn't Black until there was no other possible seat available. I was sensitive, and so was every other Black to that kind of, and believe me, psychologically, that's in fact still the experience that we have, even in San Francisco.
And I think people outside of the Black community are just starting to truly want to listen and hear it and understand it and process that now in the wake of what happened to George Floyd. Another thing, I want to shift gears here a little bit too, is right now in the California legislature, we have a bill advancing that would require ethnic studies for the California State University system. And then at the same time, we're putting affirmative action back on the November ballot to vote on. We're gonna take a short break on the air, but I want to talk about that on our live stream platforms. All right, so Mayor, let me get your thoughts on that, whether you think affirmative action, because you've been through this before, right? We had it,
yes,
we voted it out,
matter of fact,
and now it may be coming back. That and ethnic studies in CSU. What is your opinion on those?
I think both are totally and completely necessary. You're not going to get rid of racism in this country by race-neutral action. The business involving affirmative action and the abolition thereof, or the restrictions imposed, was because somebody said race neutral was the best thing. That obviously you can't undo damage with owning neutrality. You've got to be an active in trying to undo all of that damage. Ethnic studies elevates the level of having none folk in a particular culture know about people in the other culture. In this case, white people know something about Black people. White people don't know. White people know very little about Black people.
Yes, but now the desire seems to finally be there, especially among the young people, to change that, right? So I think ethnic studies being part of the curriculum, that could potentially really help. Because one of the things you notice about the curriculum in California public schools is that there's the lacking of voices of writers and historians of color.
There is no question that ethnic studies are going to be incredibly contributive to an elevation of knowledge. And you are correct, it will come from these youngsters who are in the streets and who are not apologizing for their desire to see institutional change.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, the protesters on the numbers.
All right, Mayor Brown, hold that thought.
Yes.
We're coming back on air right now. And we are back with the former mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. I want to shift into politics now because you're never really out of it. You know, you never can step away completely. I know you've been watching the presidential race closely, and recently national polls, especially after George Floyd, really show Joe Biden widening his lead over President Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, I do not make that there is a guaranteed win. I believe that President Trump hurts himself more than anything else. I'm also firmly of the opinion that at the moment, people, in many cases, do not have a great reason to go vote for Joe Biden. We had a great reason to vote for Barack Obama. He not only was African American, he also said, I am going to fix healthcare. So Bill Clinton, same way. He talked about doing something with the economy and repairing it when he ran. We need Joe Biden to give people a reason to vote for him, not just vote against Trump.
So what would be that reason? Do you have any advice?
He wins. Yes, I do. I think if Joe Biden said, voting for me is not just for me, voting for me may give us the opportunity to net 5 new senators that will result in the control of the Senate going to Democrats. Voting for me will give us a chance to replace any vacancy on the Supreme Court with a person more like Ginsburg than like Alito or like Thomas or any of those people. All those are things that people can identify with. And we've got to be careful because there is a collection of progressives that will try to require more. The Bernie Sanders will try to require more. If you're not a pure person, they will say, I can't vote for you. I'm not voting for the other person, but I can't vote for you. That's what they did to Hillary Clinton. We've got to map a way in which that won't happen to Joe Biden.
So I know you normally refrain from endorsements, but I got to ask you about a potential VP choice. Senator Amy Klobuchar bowed out this week, citing this as a moment she thinks for a woman of color. You agree with that?
Well, I'm sorry that Mr. Biden said it was only a woman's position. I don't think it's only a woman's position. I think we ought to be about trying to get the public to understand the best quality, period, without reference to gender, without reference to race, without reference to culture, period. I think it really ought to be who can best replace Biden in case of a need. I would pray that it would be a woman of color, but I don't want to be burdened with folks saying you didn't select the best, because I am about always doing the best.
Having said that, do you have a pick? I mean, Senator Kamala Harris, obviously, close relationship with you and a mentee. Would you put your money there?
There are several people that could very easily fill the role. And she is clearly one of the several.
All right. I think that's as much as I'm going to get out of you with that one. I tried. I got to also not let you go before we chat about some other stuff, because there are a lot of people who are following your career, your life, your interests very closely. So I want to bring in some Facebook questions from fans. So first off is from Hugh Beatty, who says, I'd like to meet his tailor. Who is your tailor or favorite shop these days?
Well, I know at one time, the answer would have been Wilkes Bashford. My best friend, he died a few years ago. As a matter of fact, in terms of clothing, it was kind of Wilkes who helped out the course that caused me to invest more in clothing than I can afford. And that habit is still with me. And so there are 3 or 4 places now that I find what I wear can come from. And they are Neiman Marcus, the men's store there, and obviously the Wilkes Bashford store on Sutter Street, the store called Keaton's on Grant Avenue, and a newcomer in the place that you and everybody knows as Maiden Lane, as a place is Zaire. That really, and the current vest that I'm wearing is one that I got is Zaire. It was a few days ago that I was with a friend of mine who was wearing a vest, and I was so envious of his vest. I had not seen a great looking vest for a long time. That I spent a little bit of my time yesterday trying to find a vest. What did it is Zaire, this vest.
All right, good to know, because I hadn't seen that one before. I was wondering about that. Lawrence Ching also wants to say the mayor has a history of being impeccably dressed. What does he do with his wardrobe after he's worn something more than 3 times?
At one time, I would check at the end of every year, and if there was something that I'd not worn all that year, I would give it to the Goodwill. One out of the things to give to the Goodwill by that standard. What I now do is that I try to give the Goodwill a wardrobe every December. And I literally advertise it for Goodwill. I become a spokesperson, and believe me, there's somewhere between 25 and 40 pieces of clothing, shoes, hats, and other things that I give to Goodwill every year. And they make a lot of money selling, some of which I've only worn once.
Okay. All right, Mayor, we're going to just ask you one more question over on our live stream platform, and that's going to be about the Columbus statue and you. So join us there if you want. Be right back. All right, Mayor, this is an interesting one. I'm going to throw it at you. Ken Herrick wants to know, how would he feel about a statue of him replacing the one that Columbus was just taken down in San Francisco?
I do not deserve being canonized in that fashion, because in 30 years, somebody would remove me.
Okay. I wonder if you think, first of all, I'm not sure if that's true, but second of all, I wonder, you know, as mayor, you build bridges amongst the different communities that make up San Francisco, Italian Americans, of course, being one of them. Can you think of another Italian American figure that has contributed a lot to the city of San Francisco that you think might be a good replacement?
No, I cannot think of an Italian who has contributed a lot that could be a replacement. I'm sure that that community may very well have somebody that they would want to have a statue after. By the way, you know, the Bay Bridge
Willie Brown
is named after Willie Brown Bridge. And it's a funny story, by the way. People had always continued to call it the Bay Bridge until last week, when the protests were on, blocking traffic for 3 or 4 hours. Suddenly, the scribes started describing it as the Willie Brown Bridge.
Oh, well, I think that's because they associate you with civil rights and, you know, action. I think that's what it is. We'll look at it that way, shall we?
Yes.
All right. Well, Mayor, it's always good talking with you. You are a delight. I appreciate spending this time with you today. Come back anytime, all right?
Thank you, and I will come back.
All right. Sounds good. In a different outfit. All right, take good care. Our thanks to former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown for joining us today to share his thoughts on so many of the important matters of the day. Yeah. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining us today on this interactive show, Getting Answers. Today, we got answers from former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. We'll leave you with a look at the Port of Oakland rally and march earlier today relating to Juneteenth, one of the many marches happening today. We also saw a rally outside San Francisco City Hall. This one was huge at ports up and down the West Coast. And of course, we mentioned San Francisco City Hall, Carquinez Bridge, Palo Alto, Oakland, everywhere in the Bay Area for Juneteenth. You can track them all at abc7news.com and the ABC7 News app. And we'll be here every day at 3 o'clock weekdays on air and on live stream answering your questions. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Thank you, Facebook friends. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Good. See you next week.